So, my name is Bart McDonald. I know a lot of you guys, either having had treated a few of you in the past, and or other types of things, being with the city or other companies that we work with. We've got some folks coming in from Idaho Falls, so if we get them coming in from Idaho Falls or Shelley, yeah, we'll let them come in the back and we'll cheer for them when they come in. But typically, so if you don't know me, I'm a physical therapist here in Pocatello. I've been here for probably, since 2000. So it's been about 23, almost 4 years in practice. And my love for a long time has been the injured worker and trying to be on the prevention side. Typically in physical therapy school, we have to admit a little secret. They usually just teach us to wait in your office for injured people to come and see you, which really is kind of a bad deal for everybody. Those that have been in for physical therapy, sometimes it's not very easy. And if we could do anything we could to avoid injuries by working directly with companies on the ergonomic side, then it's a win for everybody. Today, we wanted to look at two objectives. I think the last time we met, we were out at Simplot, and we spent time looking at a program that OSHA has set up called an OSHA First Aid, where essentially we can go and treat somebody before it becomes an OSHA recordable. And for all of you guys that work for city, fire, police, that means nothing to you because government groups don't necessarily follow underneath the OSHA umbrella. But it still is very helpful to use an early intervention program, and being able to get treatment early for people with minor sprains and strains and those types of things is kind of what we went through. And really the government has set up through OSHA a program incentivizing individuals. Make sure you get food, guys. Get your lunch. But incentivizing companies to use prevention programs to be able to save money and obviously pain for people that are injured by getting early treatment and avoiding more costly surgery and disability. Today's topic, we're going to change gears a little bit and look at kind of the overall functional job analysis as what we would call really the foundation for any type of ergonomic program in any setting. And so that's our objective today. Before we get going, what would be in the market today? In the last 2 years, we would say, really, things for companies have changed dramatically because of different market pressures. We've got inflation. How has inflation impacted companies in southeastern Idaho, if you were to just throw out some things here? Any ideas? What has inflation done to southeastern Idaho? Yeah, Dave? Okay, absolutely. Yeah, we've seen some layoffs, some cutbacks associated with it, because on the bottom line side, it's really tough for companies that produce doing different types of manufacturing, we're just going to increase our prices by 40% because we're trying to overcome labor costs as well as inflation, and we'll just get the same amount of purchasing done by our target consumer. That doesn't always just translate. And so definitely we've seen some layoffs. For the employee, for the injured worker, or maybe even for the non-injured worker, what are we looking at in the daily lives of the people that we work along? Last couple of years, have things changed in the market for the employee? Lots more expensive. Yeah, so their dollar's not going as far. How does that potentially impact whether I get treatment or not? If I'm an injured worker and things are not going as far, does that change my mindset as an injured worker? It's just, a little bit of a back strain yesterday. Am I going to come to report this or not? Of course, they're always encouraged to come and report, come in and come out and see the doctor, do whatever we need to do to get that patient better as soon as possible. But on the physical therapy side of things, superior physical therapy, I would say in the last 2 to 3 months, we're seeing a little bit of a lag where just what used to be early reporting is just a little bit, and it's not on the side of the company. It's not on the side really of the physician by any means. We're all kind of following the same type of protocols to get people early in, but we are seeing a little bit of a hesitation by the employee. Not that they don't trust that they're going to get care, but they recognize that their budget is a little bit tighter, and sometimes in this process, economic changes happen to somebody that is injured as well, and we recognize that. So when we think about this foundation for a functional job analysis, why it's important, even what this is, our other objective is to be able to, by the end of today, in approximately 50 minutes, we're going to try to look at an example of how to create a return on investment for the company. Because one of the biggest barriers that we find is economics, whether that is on the side of the injured employee or that is on the side of the company. And if we ignore the elephant in the room, that being the economics of both of those parties, in this transaction of getting somebody better, we will miss a lot of opportunity. And we will potentially have a lot of people that just don't even report until something becomes more chronic. So what we've tried to do over at Superior Physical Therapy is follow what's called the WorkWell program. This is a nationwide kind of gold standard program for physical therapists in order to be trained and interact with companies and be able to help the injured worker. Kind of our question, of course, is to always examine what would be a return on investment. And what we're going to show you at the end is how we sit down with a company who wants to say, hey, we want to do a little bit more, we want to become proactive, we want to save more money by having less injured workers or getting them better faster. How do we come up with a return on investment so that we can help really the company understand where the win is on the economic side, as well as the economic and pain side, really disability side for any worker. So here is kind of the ergonomic intervention in its skeleton. The first part of this is what we would call a functional job analysis. And really, as a physical therapist, this is a lot of fun. I don't know if this is fun for everybody, but we're kind of a weird group, especially if we're not in the category of physical therapists that are waiting for an injury to happen. We're trying to be on the prevention side. Not that we have a crystal ball sometimes to know how much good we've done, but we try to estimate that by statistics. But we do in this, what we need to do in this functional job analysis is be able to go into a company and create a definitive list of what it is that each person does in the plant or in the department. And not necessarily what their end product is, but how much lifting, pushing, pulling, how many reps they have to do, what's the physical or critical demands of each of the jobs. And so functional job descriptions have been around for a long time in occupational health. This is not a new concept by any means, but it's kind of one that certain companies and larger companies, by and large, take advantage of, but are certainly available to all sizes of companies to be able to enact. And as we kind of look at a functional job description as a part of the core, it becomes a part of the culture. In other words, the last time that we were in with a company, we walked around with these clipboards, taking pictures, trying to measure with a push-pull, and all of a sudden everybody in the plant's like, who's these weird guys over here in the corner running around doing these push and pulling, asking us to lift, taking pictures, taking angles, doing all this stuff. We're having a party. It's a lot of fun for us, and we're doing a bunch of math and trying to figure out the reps and sets and resistance that's associated with somebody's job. And then all of a sudden, it's very interesting how many experts are in the room. And really, in this creation, when we go on site with a company, we, for about 2 seconds, are the expert in the room, and then everybody else is more expert than us because they're doing the job, and they're so willing to give us the feedback on what is necessary. The nice thing is that this process creates an amazing safety culture, right? When we have worked with different companies, and we started at about 2002 to 2003 working with different companies, and then kind of created by 2004, 2005 this kind of this group in the community of we want to invite HR and safety people, we want to come together on a quarterly basis. We want to come out and we want to take ourselves outside of the clinic and into the plant, onto into the workplace. And when we first did this, we started asking people if we could do a functional job description, and everybody said, well, I've got a job. Well, everybody's got a job description in HR. You go over to HR, they'll print them all for you. This is really not quite that. Though sometimes I read a job description and it'll have some listing of, hey, we don't lift over 50 pounds, and some general parameters for a physical description. But this gets really down to the nitty-gritty. And when people are involved in this process, the employees feel a certain amount of safety culture that's then embedded into the workplace. So what they are and what they are not, it really is not a list of the valuable final product that each job creates. It's really not a list of how many hours, though it does have that embedded in there, that everybody has to work, and whether I have work weekends or swing shift or whatever. This is really just that how much time do I have to spend in a kneeling position in an 8-hour day? How many reps of lifting 62 pounds versus 72 pounds versus 22 pounds do I have to do? How often am I at a conveyor belt that is really machine driven at its pace? And am I going from a pronated position with 6.5 pounds to a supinated position over and over again? And how does that play in? Dr. Saunders and I were just having this conversation to whether somebody should be on this line 2 days in a row versus 3 days in a row. When we gather this kind of data, all of this creates this kind of wonderful picture of what the body of the employee is undergoing on a daily basis, and then gives both safety officers, HR to a certain degree, but certainly physicians and physical therapists, a lot more data to make and help make recommendations on a better outcome for prevention, as well as a whole slew of other programs that we'll enact for the benefit of the individuals in the job. So why do we want these functional job descriptions? What is that? Does anybody have these or have been working on them as far as within their companies? This is a new concept. I know you guys have been doing this. Yeah. So far, just give us a little bit of background. Why did you guys look at this? And tell us a little bit about your company. I know.
So I'm the safety manager from Wood Valley Natural from Process Church, beginning to end, non-edible plastic. So we do have a lot of labor, a lot of movements going on, and that's what I like about it. The ergonomics part of it, being able to come out and teach proper movements, proper postures, that's what I like. And then seeing the job analysis go through, that went through my mind because it was nice and detailed on every step.
It's kind of a cool process. Yeah, no, thanks. We Golden Valley's been a really fun project in the last few months, and there's a lot of great work still to do, but there's a lot of things that we've been able to accomplish up there. In this process, and really, you brought this up already, there's a lot of, when we know what is necessary to get a job done, you can kind of see this up on here on this slide, it gives us a whole slew of other things that we can do to help reduce injuries. It gives us the ability to job coach a situation, whether it's be in a return to work. We know exactly what is required of this individual. The physician is saying, yep, this person is ready to go. And in that process, rather than being like, yep, go to it, you're out of therapy, you're done, then gives us the opportunity to go on site, whether it be safety or the therapy group from an ergonomic specialist kind of position to be able to go on and help somebody say, that's great, now you had that wrist injury and you're back to doing that palm down pronated position to that supinated position with that 7 pounds over and over again. We don't want you to do that for too long. We're going to have you switch hands. We're going to change you up on this other line. We're going to make a little bit of some adjustments here, or we're going to have a little bit of a completely different mechanism because of the injury. We're going to modify this completely. So job coaching is huge. The ergonomic opportunities that are associated with this, both inside the company and from the outside helpers, right? Those are really big. One of the things that we find as we go through these functional job analysis, we've created this list of everybody that works in a warehouse. What do they do? Everybody that works on line 5 versus production over on line 6, what happens to them? And even we've jumped over and done some of these for fire, for police. Those are crazy functional job analysis because the job changes so drastically all the time. But be able to capture that in, take somebody that is previously injured and get it back to work, or create a light duty program, or be able to even just go out on the floor for somebody that's not injured and say, hey, look, from an ergonomic position, for you to do this over and over again, we know you do this over and over again, we're going to change and recommend some modifications to what you're doing and change your ergonomics, so maybe your body mechanics in this. Gives us the basis to create wellness programs, employee education, and then I kind of touched on this at the beginning, utilizing this OSHA first aid program, early intervention treatment that's not something that's recordable, to be able to help people get better faster. And then really the end game with some of these that make it all the way through each of these barriers and still get injured, because we know that there's a certain percentage that still that happens. How do we get them back to work? So let me tell you, well, let me hit this. I'm going to go through how this happens. I'm going to tell you a couple stories. So how do we create this? Really start off with looking and interviewing the workers and the supervisors. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to look at what do you do in your job. And people will tell you all kinds of things, and you go out on the floor and actually it changes just a little bit, but that's okay. And then we go to this observation period where we're observing people doing their job. And we take accurate measurements as we described. We make a draft of this functional job description. It's all the things, push, pull, lift, and then turn around and finalize it with supervisors and those performing the job, validate those after these essential job functions have been created and documented. And then we turn around and we kind of use these with the workers in two major ways. One, sure, if somebody gets injured, return to work. This is the criteria we have to meet in order to get back there. Let me tell you a quick story on that regard, because this is very, very valuable. We create a test out of this as well, that we typically will call it a post-offer screen or a POET. And I had several years ago a gal that came from a plant here in Pocatello, and she'd had a rotator cuff tear, and it was a fairly sizable tear, and she went back to see the physician, and it had been about 6 weeks of therapy after about a month of rest and then jumping into therapy. And I don't know, has anybody had a significant shoulder injury in the past that would like to admit it? Yeah. Little surgery in the past? Yeah. How is it the first week of sleep? No. What, are you sleeping in a recliner? Yeah. Yeah. You can't even sleep. You can't do these things. She got through all of this, went through some therapy it was actually with one of my competitors. But we had been working with this company. And we had the functional job analysis set up and the functional job descriptions. We knew exactly what she had to do. But because therapy was done somewhere else on the return to work process, those things were never tested. In other words, that return to work test that comes out of this functional job description wasn't completed. So the patient went back to see the physician, and the physician asked and did the evaluation and said, okay, so do you think you can do your job? I don't really have any data here. No one's giving me anything to be able to measure. You're good to go. And it was a good surgeon. He does a great job. Sent the patient back to work, and then I got this phone call from the safety officer that said, hey, patient X came back today, was discharged from their physician and for full return to work. And they can't do half of their things on their job. And I'm like, really? I didn't rehab this patient. I'm not quite sure what went on there, how the patient didn't come to see us, but we would have loved to have that opportunity so we could do the test. And they said, well, can you do the test right now? Because we need to undo the return to work. And I'm like, oh, nope. That breaks the rules. You have to do things in the proper sequence. And they were kind of upset as a company because of the kind of the mismanagement. And it can happen. You can see how these things can fall through the cracks, per se, to where someone gets all the way through the return to work process, but no one bothered to tell the physician, nor maybe even in this case, even the therapist, what was required for this person to get back to work. And guess who was in trouble? Oh, I was in trouble because I had promised the company that we would do this test so that this type of thing didn't happen. So now we've got a patient that is supposed to be able to lift, I think it was 50 pounds, but all she could lift was 25. And if she lifted over 25, shoulder pain would come back. And so the company was kind of stuck. We did do a kind of a wellness program to try to undo what had been done. But you can kind of see in this situation how critical it can be for everybody to have the right knowledge. And that's what comes out of this functional job analysis, this little mini test for return to work. Has anybody also, HR safety, have you guys ever had anybody that came and interviewed within 2 to 4 weeks of getting their job, they were injured? Yeah, that's happened, right? And you're like, wow, what did we do wrong in our interview process? We asked them all the questions. We even told them what the job demands are. We get back, we're talking to their supervisor. Supervisor says, boy, they could never do this job. They were not physically able to do this job from the beginning. I can't tell you how many times as a physical therapist, that's the patient that I'm treating. That it was within the first really quarter of hire. And you look at that and you go, wow, if we could have just known, perhaps with our crystal ball, that this new hire couldn't have done that job safely, they didn't have the physical capabilities to do it, we would have never put them in that situation. In fact, we probably would have just hired them for a different job because we have several openings, right? And that is also what the functional job analysis does. It gives us the ability to put this pre-work screen together so we can have people actually tested to know if they can do a job safely. Yeah, Dave.
Something different, and they'll call their manager, they'll call their safety. I have other tasks at that company that we've done job descriptions for, throw them in different tests, and I call this is so much better. And they get, not only do they see it and they can read it, but they can do it and feel what they're going to be doing with it. It's very valuable.
Yeah. I think I do quite a few job interviews in my current job as well. And one of the things that I always like to do is in any interview with a professional, with a front desk person, something in a therapy clinic scenario, I just want to know if we are the best fit for you and you are the best fit for us. And physically, this is what that tests. Because a lot of people, they don't know. You've asked them, hey, can you lift 50 pounds every day about every 2.5 minutes? Yeah, I can do that. How much is 50 pounds again? Right? I mean, that's, am I lifting that on a daily basis? Do I really know? Oh, and is it from here to here, or is it from here to here? And do I just have to carry it? And that functional job analysis that leads to this functional job description, that leads to then this test, takes the more difficult aspects of the job that truly match the job and creates a win-win situation so that people can really know. So this is we've kind of been through, this is really how the functional job descriptions are utilized nationwide. That qualifying workers abilities to do the test, which is kind of what we've gone over. Facilitating the return to work with a return to work test, so we know exactly what we've got to have somebody do before we're kind of kicking them back over to the doctor and saying, yep, they're good. They're good. And he's going, okay, I trust you guys that what you're telling me is good. We got to give those physicians good data. And then really making sure that, like what Dave was saying, we've got options in different companies. There is a shortage of good employees out there. And so for HR to make really good decisions on how we can best utilize somebody that wants to work for our company is significant. And then we've got insight into kind of these workplace requirements. Oops, I'm skipping. Let's go back. And when we think about the workplace requirements, one of my favorite things to do as soon as we've gone through a company or plant and done the functional job analysis and measured all these things is then to sit down and look at the high risk scenarios that are being performed on a daily basis. And when we do that, it's easy to see. For instance, this was back with Heinz, and we can probably talk a little bit about Heinz because they moved out. They had a job, I remember we were looking at one point, where you had to take a roller that I think it weighed 220 pounds. It was a two-person lift, but still, 220 pounds is a two-person lift. It's still 110 each. That's still really a lot. And we looked at that and we said, after doing the functional job analysis and making these functional job descriptions, this one activity has got to change. And that was where we spent our next 3 weeks. How do we come up with an ergonomic solution for this? We already had enough data that showed how many people in the last, 5 years have been injured doing this one task. But by doing the functional job description and breaking it down, we were like, we don't have to change this whole job on line 6. We just need to change this one task. And we were able to find an ergonomic solution so they didn't have to do that lift anymore, and took that 110-pound lift, brought it down, so the next hardest lift for them was like 50, 55, which is what we're trying to target. So anyway, lots of fun, productive things happen that way. And then we're really looking to improve productivity as well. Anybody here have to look at productivity numbers on a monthly basis, weekly basis from the plant? I mean, it happens, right? We have to have a productive company. And even when we talk about like a municipality for the city, right? If we're picking on the fire department or the police department, if we have somebody that's down and out, and we're having to fill that job with somebody else, and everybody else is having to do overtime because Officer X is injured, it actually reduces our budget significant because of the overtime and then the effects of burnout that are associated with that. So being able to reduce our risk and strategically change, really does strategically change the whole productivity of the group, of the division, and really of the plant. So these are kind of functional job analysis, is kind of to sum up, it really is best practice. It's not something that we at Superior Physical Therapy made up. This has been around for a long time. There are some do's and don'ts with this on a legal basis. There's some really strong guidelines from EEOC, which is kind of from an HR basis, kind of your, really, would you say it was your kind of your OSHA version of oversight, for hiring and all good practices for HR? We have to make sure that if we're going to have a test post-offer for a potential employee, that we don't overshoot or really even undershoot their job. So the Dial Corporation, this is an old case study, this is kind of one of my favorite ones. They decided they were going to hire a physical therapist to come in, and they do all types of manufacturing in the Midwest. And they had them come into a plant, and they had a history with a lot of their employees of shoulder injuries. And for all of you that have had shoulder surgery and have shoulder injuries, if you were creating a test, you'd be like, I want to make sure that everybody's shoulders can do all the things that we're going to put them through on a daily basis, because everybody hates shoulder injuries. So what they did is they said, we know they only have to lift 50 pounds to about 48, 52 inches height, but we're going to have them go ahead and lift 75 pounds up to about 60 inches. Okay, so if you think about 75 pounds, can anybody do that? Raise your hand if you think you 75 pounds. We got a lift test. We're going to test you after. 75 pounds up to 60 inches. I don't know if I can pull that off very easily. It's a tough one. We got a couple of plants that do some things that are that heavy, and that's okay. I mean, it's not really. If we could ergonomically change that, we should do that. But what was the error for the Dial Corporation is it was not true. What they were trying to do in their intent was, we'll create a functional job analysis here and we'll just fudge it a little bit. It doesn't really fit the job, but what we're going to do is we will then only hire people that can lift not just 50 pounds, but if they can do 75, we've done a great job here, right? Because we're going to have less injuries because we're going to have more muscle mass or whatever it is that helps us in this, maybe a stronger rotator cuff with anybody that can do that job. And their intention, you could kind of see it. You'd be like, great, we're solving injuries. What they ended up doing was discriminating against who? Women. Yeah. No women were ever hired in that job. None. And after a couple of years, all women that applied for that job kind of figured that out, recognized, because somebody else, probably some of the men, said, actually, we never have to lift 75 pounds. I don't know why they make you do that. Well, it was the one thing that they made me do that I failed, which was the reason I couldn't get this job. And so there was a class action lawsuit, yada, yada, yada. So look, functional job analysis is great. Functional job descriptions are great. Post-offer testing is great. But you have to do it right. You don't want to actually, even if your intentions are good, overshoot or even undershoot that job. So we go ahead and we utilize this to do pre-offer screens. In our offices, we do these all the time. With some of our bigger companies, we will come out on site and do them in a little mini office or a little mini clinic scenario there at the plant. Of course, we talked a little bit about return to work rehab. As physical therapists, one of our main jobs is to reduce pain, increase range of motion, strength, restore joint function, do all those things that are necessary to get somebody either back to return to sport or return to work. And really, when we think about I know for most physical therapists, you asked all the physical therapists, well, most physical therapists coming out of school and you ask them, who do you want to treat? You're going to be like, oh, I want to treat NBA stars. I want to treat, I just watched the Super Bowl. I want to treat NFL players. That's what I want to do, right? That's all I want to treat all day long. But I'll tell you, my love, and I think a lot of in our group, really is this industrial athlete. It's everyday people, right? It's people in our community. We don't really have a lot of NFL players in our community. But what is interesting is that the higher level athletes are sometimes actually a little bit of a pain in the butt to treat. Their motivations are different. They're paid millions of dollars. Anyway, it's a whole different mindset. But some of the same things that go along with some of those NFL players and those NFL studies apply to our injured workers, our injured athletes, our industrial athletes that are injured. So there was a study of NFL players. This is about 15 years old. And they looked at ACL injuries of the knee, and they looked at what the number one factor is for someone not returning to work, right? It's in the NFL. They're making millions of dollars. What would you say? Pretty high level motivation to return to work. If I return to work, my contract continues at a very high level, maybe even get a bigger contract for another, I don't know. I can't even count the millions of dollars these guys make, right? But so there's not really a barrier of I would like to sit home and on my couch and become a couch potato. That was a really good ad, though, I thought, on the NFL, on the Super Bowl. I like that one. Anyway, but there's no real motivation to sit at home and be a couch potato if somebody's paying me millions of dollars to do what I love. It just doesn't make sense. So they looked at what are the parameters for these guys with these knee injuries from the NFL to be able to return to sport. Is it how fast they run the 40 after they've done their rehab? No. They're jumping mechanics, though that plays a huge role, especially in female athletes. That was not it either. They looked at the chronicity. Was this the second injury to the same knee? Was that the reason if someone didn't get back to the NFL after injury? And that was not it either. So running, jumping, cutting, how much can they squat? What is the strength? We do. We've got in a couple of our offices have these machines that generate and can measure torque, and they're called an isokinetic test. So it's a machine that I can set the speed on and try to make it as sport specific as possible, and it'll measure how much torque can be generated from your knee with flexion extension from your shoulder, internal external rotation. It's really cool, but kind of geeking out on that for a minute. It was not that either, right? I thought that was going to be it. It's got to be really the ability to recruit muscle at the right speed is the reason that these guys don't end up returning to sport and getting back to the NFL. Like they just don't cut the mustard, so to speak, right? None of that was true. It was a questionnaire called the Fear Avoidance Questionnaire. if they scored on the fear avoidance questionnaire that they thought or they were afraid that they were going to get injured again, they didn't return to $1 million play. That was the one statistical correlation. So you kind of take that and you go, well, how does that apply to our injured athletes in this return to work rehabilitation? Is there is a mental problem that happens in each one of us on returning to sport, returning to work, if I am afraid to hurt myself again. And part of what the functional job analysis plays a key role in return to work is being able to outline for somebody that is afraid to return to work. You see it all the time, right? And it's not that somebody's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. And I'm sure, Dr. Saunders, you see this happen all the time. People come into your office and you're looking, you do your full exam and you're like, they're fit, they're ready to return to work. You ask them, hey, are you returned to work? How do you feel about the return to work? And they're like, oh, I can't do it. I don't know if I can do it. It's just gonna be too hard.
There's a time window. If I can get that conversation in this many days, it's probably gonna be okay. Let's go. If it's in this many days, it's probably gonna be a not go, and it's a lot harder. Yeah.
There's a happy window. The longer that they stay off work, all the studies say, the harder it is that you're going to get that person back. Like sometimes ever. Sometimes it goes to disability over whether we hit that window or not. Like it's kind of crazy. But the psychological impact of I am afraid of getting re-injured because this was really freaking painful when this happened to me is an impact that can hinder, or if used correctly in that window, can help us to overcome this fear avoidance. And so helping from our standpoint, when we have the data, they're coming in to see Dave for some physical therapy, he's taking them through it, and he's going, hey, you're looking really good. And they're maybe on the back side of that window going, I am not looking good. No, I am looking bad. It's easier for us to say, well, let's look at the criteria of that return to work test. So let's see how you're doing today. Oh, you passed this one. Let's try this one. Let's try this one. Let's try this one. Well, you did really well. You've got one that you're just a couple pounds down on, but we're almost there. And all of a sudden, that fear avoidance starts to diminish a little bit because a perspective of reality and safety in return to work of understanding is starting to take place. So out of everything I would say today, that is my favorite aspect of a functional job analysis and this functional job description. It gives us the ability to convince people where they really are, show them really are where they're at in this whole return to work process. Light duty programs, anybody doing light duty programs? Sometimes it comes and goes, right? How do we do it? How do we make it? You get somebody with a back injury and so you have them to sweep all day. I promise that's not going to work out so well because their back's going to hurt sweeping all day. Like, that's frustrating. It's frustrating, right? So what we try to also do is sit down as kind of as a team effort and say, hey, if you've got somebody with a shoulder injury on line 5, what is the light duty program? Well, I don't know. Maybe we can have them to line 3. Well, maybe. Can we keep them on line 5? Can we keep them there doing X, Y, and Z and just take out one component? Again, we go back to that functional job description to say, what's the components? What makes sense? First aid, we kind of already talked about this at the beginning, but it's really nice to know how to treat these these minor injuries from a first aid perspective based on that end goal of what do we have to get them back to. Consulting, let's carve out, let's make changes in the ergonomic side and get rid of the high risk. And then this is our Superman program, our industrial athlete, where we're trying to come in, maybe it's a stretching program, a warm-up program. We can't really create these things for each individual grouping of employee. If we really have no idea what they do, we'll just have them start stretching here, maybe here, but they're doing this all day long, and we didn't address that at all. Like, that just doesn't even make sense. So at the core basis of trying to make some type of a warm-up or injury prevention fitness program, trying to get them to the gym for certain activities in this industrial athlete scenario, we got to know what they do. And then at the end of it is when everything doesn't go well. and this is kind of an aside, but there's times where Dr. Saunders, another physician, will ask us in the return to work to do what's called a functional capacity evaluation. And does anybody heard of that? Does that ring a bell? Probably not. It doesn't happen that often, but it's really a test that we do. Again, this comes back through this national group of training and this WorkWell group for us, where they train us as physical therapists how to do a 2-day test to find out what's somebody's true capacity. So instead of like an hour little pre-return to work test that's looking at the hardest things they do in their job, what we do is we take, and we, as ordered by a physician generally, sometimes an insurance company, sometimes an attorney, all these things get a little bit of some players in this. They want to know what's the patient's true capacity or functional capacity. The reason that a functional job description, which was our reason to have this chat today, is important in this is we take that functional job description after we've done an FCE, 2-day FCE, to see how much somebody can push, pull, lift, crawl, kneel, ladder climb, fine motor, gross motor, like the list goes on and on, out of all the things that we have these people do and test to their maximum capacity. And then we take that functional job description and we compare the two. We compare all the notes and we say, the doc wants to know, can somebody get back to work safely after this level of trauma, and maybe a little bit of some legal and some other things that are just muddying the waters on return to work, or maybe we missed our window for return to work because of whatever reason, and now the patient doesn't think they can return to work, and so this FCE is ordered, and we take that data yet again and be able to give back to the insurance company, the physician, and say yay or nay on certain job descriptions. And as HR, you'll get some of these. This is not every day. This might be once every couple of years that it goes, hopefully, to just that goes this far, right? But you'll get a report from us that'll say, you've got the functional job description that you guys have seen and worked with every day for years from us on one side, and then this really long 2-day test with a yes, no, can we make reasonable accommodations for this, right? Can this be, if it's, especially in a non-work related situation. So that's kind of another interaction. And that's really kind of how all this plays out. Any questions before we look at quickly an example of return on investment? Because this is an investment, right? If you're gonna work on safety programs, I don't care what your safety programs. Have you ever found a safety program that doesn't cost something? No, it all costs something, right? But the question is what does the employee as well as the company get from the effort? Yeah.
I don't know if it's a topic, but have you ever heard of any physician being afraid of giving restrictions because the employee could potentially lose their job? Or fear of them losing their job?
Fear of losing the job. We worked with one company, this is probably 10 years ago, that that tended to accidentally find other reasons to let people go. It wasn't so much the physician was afraid of that, because really, I think all the physicians I've ever worked with, no matter what happens with the company, always do what's right for the patient first. I don't think I found anybody that's truly swayed in that scenario, but I've seen patients and employees that have been worried about losing their job, especially with this company about 10 years ago. Yeah. Which sometimes, I don't know if it'd be great to get people within your organizations right now and get them to do an anonymous little survey or questionnaire and ask them that very question as employees, because no matter how much we work on a safety culture, no one is ever going to get fired for being injured. This is not how we work. In the back of people's minds, somebody always knows somebody that was the story for them, maybe in a different plant, in a different realm. There's some fear. We're always trying to overcome that. It's a great question. Have you ever seen that, Dr. Saunders, on that, where you felt like a physician was stepping away?
In the last couple of months with the company downsizing, I had a lot of people come in and say, if I don't get better, I'm going to lose my job. I just found
Yeah.
Whether it happened or not, I don't know. But I always do my best to say, well, these are your restrictions. This is what you have to do. It's not my job to decide whether you have your job or not, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the weight on your shoulders is the patient's health.
I work for the company as much as I work for the patient. All of the patient's health comes first, but
yeah,
I've got to make sure that the patient's getting better fast, but also making sure the company
it's doing there.
not being screwed over.
Yep. Perfect. Any other questions? Yeah.
How do you address things like high risk, low frequency movements? Stereotypically for me, it's going to be I've got a 300-pound patient downstairs between the toilet and the tub that I have to move up a 30-inch flight of stairs.
Yeah. I know that there's been a lot of technology probably in the last 20 years that's been put into some of those stretchers, but you still got to get the patient to the stretcher, right? You've still got to get them.
The stretcher's outside.
Yeah, it's not going to, it'll raise up and down and do all kinds of movements, but it didn't go up and down those stairs and it didn't get around the corner down to that room. Yeah, I think with our paramedics and firefighters in the last 20 years, we've spent more time. I mean, ergonomics, we want to try to brainstorm anything that we can brainstorm and look at anything out on the market that can help with that lift and that move. But we spent a lot of time on the side of the industrial athlete. There's a reason that a lot of our folks in your position are pretty fit individuals. They've got to be. And then we look at the strain and sprain and really, well, the loading that's put on the body in those positions, and then try to match up how important is it for these guys to be doing deadlift, right? I wouldn't give that as a normal exercise to just everybody, but certain groups, that's going to be really important. How much is it going to be important to be doing squatting in the weight room? We've got truly industrial athletes. We like to go in those situations and try to brainstorm with the professionals, the experts in the field, to see if there's anything else we can come up with on an ergonomic side. But honestly, it's totally weighted on the industrial athlete side. Good question. Any other questions? No. Okay, we've got just a few minutes. Hopefully, did everybody get food? I'm seeing food. Okay, just want to make sure people eat. Okay, let me just escape out of this for a minute and show you just something that we found out of Washington State just a few months ago. This is looking back at how do we talk to a safety individual from a company or HR, and then how can we take a message like, hey, we'd like to come in and help you guys out. What is the return on investment for the company? How do we figure that out? So I just wanted to show you just kind of an example. This is how the state of Washington really, and their Washington State Department of Labor and Industries, it seems like the state of Washington is always in the lead with being proactive on data research, and this one is absolutely my favorite. What they did was created a little bit of a return on investment spreadsheet so that we can put some stats of history and predict how much good we can do. And so what you're going to see up on top here, point to it, is in this past year, what type of injuries and how many did we have? This is great data. And actually, depending on the size of your company, somebody in your company is looking at this all the time. It's usually somebody with an accounting degree sometimes, but somebody's looking at this, and then it usually is coming back to HR and safety to a certain degree. If I have, in the category of type of back strains, if I had 10 of them, it's going to cost the company predictably $163,000. That's kind of a lot of money, right? And when you think about back strain, how do we get from, want to see it bigger? Let me see if I can get it bigger. How do we go from, John, come find out how to get this bigger. Okay. Oh, to the 100%. Very good. Perfect. Is that good? Okay. How do we get? There we go. What the actuary guy, the guy that sits in the insurance company back there in the back corner with a computer, or maybe he's working at home now with 5 cats. I don't know what that looks like, but they're crunching these numbers, right? And they're gonna come and figure out what the cost is. The cost is in multiple layers. It could be coming from lost time, therefore production. Could be coming from the fact that you got to see a physical therapist, you got to see a physician, you got to see, you got to go to pharmacy, you got to get an X-ray. Like, these are just medical costs associated with an injury. But a lot of this is then I've got to retrain somebody else to be in this. I got to pay somebody else overtime. Maybe I even lose an employee and I've got to start over from scratch. And all these kind of come into this algorithm. If I've got a shoulder strain, boy, less of those, so much more expensive than a back strain. And interestingly enough, when we look at these, we've got back strain, and we can do a drop down here and pick out all kinds of injuries that they've just done an immense amount of research on. And we can look at how much we're typically paying these employees and then give us an estimated kind of annual claims cost and then estimated annual indirect cost. Indirect, all those things that are not directly a medical expense, but comes back to the company either way. And it's interesting to me, the first time I saw this, is that if you look at that, the indirect cost is actually more. It actually is. It's crazy. But in this situation, from the algorithm we just ran $302,000 in indirect cost versus those direct costs that come from the claim. So we're going to put in some solutions here. Bigger yet? Okay. Maybe about there. There really is 3 main things that we've talked about today that are pretty standard to any kind of ergonomic intervention from a company basis. The first one is just the ergonomics themselves, functional job analysis that leads to what we talked about today in our functional job descriptions, these post-offer tests, ergonomic analysis. On the other side, we've got first aid, where we can get in there and do early intervention. It's cheaper, more cost-effective for the company, more effective for early intervention for the patient. And then those that don't get better here, that end up going to more rehab, prevention, maybe all the way to surgical situations at times, but trying to prevent that, rehab and prevention of surgery. And in these 3 categories, you can look at what the costs would be. On the left-hand side, for a company, if we were out working for them a couple of days a week, it's going to be about $10,000 a year. That's what those things can cost. And it depends on how many employees you have. That'll go up and down, highly variable. We're just throwing out an example. The total cost of interventions, larger companies in Detroit, auto workers, they don't work with Superior Physical Therapy. They hire me, right? I'm just working for them full time. We don't really have companies of that magnitude or size where we're at. And so typically they're going to say no one has a claim unless they go to surgery, because physical therapist Bart is going to treat all those, and he works for us. He's there treating all of our patients 24/7 probably in Detroit. And we're going to make sure that we reduce to a 0 claim unless somebody goes to surgery or has some type of other intervention. We're going to use first aid as much as we possibly can. And even if Dr. Saunders says, I want to send this person over for a steroid injection in their back, and we've got somebody that truly has a recordable at this point, we're still going to have them come back in, and we're going to send the least amount to our insurer as possible so that we have less premiums. It's just like your kid that last probably, I don't know, a teenager. Anybody got a teenager in this room that hit somebody with their car, messed up somebody's bumper? Yeah, everybody's got that. At least my kid ran into the garage door. He didn't wait for the garage door to get all the way up before he backed up. You know that kid. I'm like, why are you in such a rush? Then I have to try to decide, is the damage to the car enough that I want to make a claim with my insurance company? If I make a claim with the insurance company, what happens to my premiums for the next 3 years? Psh, they're up. Same thing happens for any company. So the larger the company, the more I'm an employee of that company. Mid-sized companies, we're coming on site because we're trying to reduce that cost as much as possible. Other companies that are maybe a little bit smaller, they're coming into our clinic. And that's just kind of the flow of things for what is most cost effective depending on your size. But in this situation where somebody is coming and where first aids can be billed to the insurance company, and you don't have any out-of-pocket so-called expense, but it can then elevate your premiums, which is the reason I go through that. And then rehab, it has its impact as well to your premiums, but it goes to insurance. So we don't have extra costs there. On the bottom line, this is our true false end of, here's our benefits. We spent $10,000 in this category of ergonomic intervention, but you can see a productivity and a total estimated value of over $600,000 by a couple days a week for a mid to larger size company. First aid, we're still going to bill this through to insurance. Total estimated savings, almost $500,000 in this category. And then on-site PT clinic kind of gives you an estimated savings of about $325,000. So in a larger company that has a couple hundred employees but under 500, this is kind of an example of how this can work. But even if I'm working with a company that has 50 employees, you can still engage in all these processes, and they all have a way that we could sit down and say, this is a return on investment. Now, I really don't want to sound like a sales dude. This is one of those things that if this is something that could be helpful, we are not the only ones that do it. I can give you a referral for 2 or 3 other therapy companies that are competitors that do the same thing. And I think they do a good job. So I throw this out there. Really, we want to have these WorkSafe seminars every quarter in our community just to have more education. And I got elected and they asked me, Bart, what do you do? This is what I'm in love with. Saving, really, if you can see there, a lot of expenses to companies that if we can put that back into the bottom line and back into even our economy, the products of those companies are making, then charge the consumer less. It's a real positive all the way down to what's going on in the family and the economics there. But it also tremendously helps reduce disability, chronic pain, issues that lead to often bankruptcy, divorce, problems in the family. Like, I love this because this is the way that I feel like as physical therapists we really get to make a true difference. So if you guys have any questions, I know we're out of time now. So I want to get people back to work because I know being late never works out too well. But feel free to, we'll leave some information. In fact, on your way out, I don't know, did we send over like a sign-up list so that if people want more information, we can give them more information? We may have not done that. We can do that on the way out. But anyway, you want more, I know most of you guys, we work with you at different levels, but if we're missing something or you're working already with a different company that's like us and you want to take some of this information back to them and say, hey, we want you guys to do a couple of these other things. Obviously, we wanted to give you just an overview of what's available to what we find to change the bottom line, both for pain and injury, but also for the finance end of the company. Any questions? Okay. Thanks for coming, guys.